Welcome back to Our Walk in Christ, and we are continuing our discussion on the prophets, and we're going to have a look at Habakkuk chapter 2, Woe to the Wicked. Before we dive on in, have a look over at the website at ourwalkinchrist.com. We have a newsletter sign up. We have podcast links. We have books for sale over in our bookstore. If you like the teaching, have a look at the books. There are a number of them there. There is also another one that is in production. We are getting ready to get that one out here soon as well. So have a look over at the website, see all the resources, also get all the updates and things like that. Also highlight, we do have some social media up here as well. You can follow along any of those. I'm not an ultra active person, but I do tell you if there's any updates, like, the Switch to Linux channel is currently in YouTube's gulag. So you wouldn't know that if you did not follow along on those to get the updates and the links to the other channels. We will actually restore that BitChute there soon. I've been in a little bit of communication with them, and I just haven't had the chance to pull the trigger. Of course, we are also on Rumble, and we might get the channel over on Odyssey sometime soon as well. So you can have a look. You can have a look at any of those places as well. But let's go ahead and get on back to Habakkuk. And you'll remember from last week, Habakkuk is a prophet that was alive at the contemporary of Josiah. Josiah cleans up the nation, and he watches as he dies. As Josiah dies, Habakkuk watches as his wicked sons take over the kingdom and restore all of the idolatry that's there. And then God is going to send in some destruction, and he starts seeing the rumblings of the decay, kind of like America right now. And he prays to God and says, God, what are you going to do? And God says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do something so amazing you wouldn't even believe it if you read it. I'm going to send your arch enemies in to destroy you entirely. And that's what happens. And Habakkuk's like, I don't understand, God, but I'll trust in you. And what we see in Habakkuk 2 is we see that not only is God going to judge the Israelites because of their sin, he is also going to judge the Babylonians, who were the instrument of his judgment. He is also going to judge them for their sins. And in this chapter, we look at 5 woes to Babylon. Let's go ahead and dive on in. Of course, remember that we read the first verse of chapter 2 last week, so we're going to pick up Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 2 and 3. The Lord answered me and said, record the vision and inscribe it on tablets, that the one who reads it may run. For the vision is yet for the appointed time. It has hastened toward the goal, and it will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it will certainly come. It will not delay. And so what we see in this principle here is that Habakkuk is going to give a vision that he is sure is going to come to pass. We see similar language and terminology like in Revelation 1, 10, and 11. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me the loud of a voice like the sound of a trumpet, saying, write in a book what you will see, and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamum, to Thyatira, and to Sardis, and to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea. Writing it down is the same thing that Habakkuk does here. And what we see is that he's going to talk about the things that are going to come. And some people will look at it and say, nothing like this is going to happen. Of course, this is where we are today. God is going to judge this nation for our wicked sins. And many, many people look at it and say, oh, where's the coming of this God you keep on talking about? We find this in 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 through 6. Know first of all that in the last days mockers will come with their mocking, following after their own lusts and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For ever since the fathers fell asleep, all continues just as it was from the beginning of creation. For when they maintain this, it escapes their notice that by the word of God the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water and by water, through which the world at that time was destroyed, being flooded with water. So what we see here is that God indeed does act, oftentimes when we're not waiting for it. When we are sitting here drunk on our own decadence, that is the time that God is going to come in and give us a wake-up call. In America, that time is coming now as we see videos of people building altars to sacrifice their children through abortion, through actual rituals, praying to the fertility god, and then collecting the waste of their abortion. This is happening in America and is being praised from the leaders of our country now. This is the beginning of the end if we do not turn it around. It's one thing when that's the silent underbelly that most people know is bad, but when the politicians are preaching it from the actual pulpits of American democracy, we see the end is near. And we have to consider, how is the end going to be near with us? Have a look at this comparison of righteousness and unrighteousness from Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. Behold, as for the proud one, his soul is not right within him, but the righteous will live by his faith. Furthermore, wine betrays the haughty man so that he does not stay at home. He enlarges his appetite like Sheol, and he is like death, never satisfied. He also gathers to himself all nations and collects to himself all peoples. Faith comes to us to comfort in the Lord and not to fall victim to the devil's schemes. Have a look at 1 Timothy 6:10. The love of money is the root of all sorts of evil, and some, being longing for it, have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. That is indeed what happens when we start following after other gods and idols and money and fame and stardom. We start to drift away, piercing ourselves with the griefs of those. Look at the 29 Club. Tell me that being a rock star is a great thing. Those that survive the 29 Club, oh boy, they do not live good lives. You can read about it. A lot of those actually have an entire chapter, I think an entire section of a chapter in my book, I Am Not Amused, about those principles. But the unrighteous slave for deeper depravity, and they fall into much sin. Proverbs 27:20, Sheol and Abaddon are never satisfied, nor are the eyes of men ever satisfied. We long for sin. That is the natural state of man. And when we turn our life towards Christ, he redeems us. Have a look at Titus chapter 2, verses 11 and 12. The grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all men, instructing us to deny ungodliness and worldly desires, and to live sensibly, righteously, and godly in the present age. That is how we are supposed to live. Not ungodliness, not worldly desires, but sensibly, righteously, and godly. Now, as we say this, we're going to jump into here, talk about the 5 woes of Babylon that lead to its ultimate judgment. The first woe, the increase of what is not his. Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 6 through 8. Will not all of these take up a taunt song against him, even mockery and insinuations against him, and say, woe to him who increases what is not his. Woe, for how long? And makes himself rich with loans. Will not your creditors rise up suddenly, and those who collect from you awaken? Indeed, you will become plunder for all of them, because you have looted in many nations all the remainder of the peoples who loot you, because of the human bloodshed and the violence done to the land, to the town, and all its inhabitants. This first woe is a woe of increasing what is not his, what is not his. The Babylonians took other nations as plunder, And God will indeed send them as plunder for other nations, as Babylon itself is going to be destroyed. Have a look at this from 2 Kings 25:11, some of the historical narratives surrounding what is actually going on here. The rest of the people who were left in the city, the deserters who deserted to the king of Babylon, and to the rest of the people, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away into exile. So he is talking here about the people who were carried away after the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem after the death of Josiah during the reign of his son Jehoiakim. And of course, we have a little bit more here. Daniel, remember, was one of these captives carried away. Daniel 5:30-31. The same night Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was slain. So Darius the Mede received the kingdom at about age of 62. That is the fall of the Babylonians, as they carried many into exile to plunder. Thus they are plundered by Darius the Mede. That was one of the things that was happening at that time. The second woe begins. Woe for the greedy for evil gain. Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 9 through 11. Woe to him who gets evil gain for his house and puts his nest on high, to be delivered from the hand of calamity. You have devised a shameful thing for your house by cutting off many peoples. So you are sinning against yourself. Surely the stone will cry out from the wall, and the rafter will answer from the framework. The evil gain puts his nest on high. The Babylonians conquered for greed, not just the palace, but the common soldiers. It wasn't just the leaders who were greedy for gain. It was the soldiers, the individual people. Those people would come in and they would kill and they would plunder simply to steal the bracelet on your wrist. That is what they did. To contrast this, Paul gives us these instructions again from 1 Timothy chapter 6, this time verses 17 through 19. Instruct those who are rich in the present age not to be conceited or to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. Instruct them to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous, and to be ready to share, storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is life indeed. Do not dwell yourself on riches, lest you fall into greedy gain. Woe 3 to the Babylonians and to us as well through the text. He who builds a city with bloodshed. Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 12 through 14. Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed and founds a town with violence. Is it not indeed from the Lord of hosts that people toil for fire and nations grow weary for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as waters cover the sea. We see here that injustice is abominable to God. This is what he says, Deuteronomy 16:19. You shall not distort justice. You shall not be partial. You shall not take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and perverts the words of the righteous. This is an important thing to keep in mind, because we are living a life now of pure injustice. Everything is injustice around us, and we have to not be broken down or wearied out, but instead, as we experience injustice, what we should be doing instead is seeking to God and say, God, you deal with the injustice, because God will be known finally in the end to everyone. Woe number 4 is endorsing debauchery. This is the one that is so part of our culture. Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. Woe to you who make your neighbors drink, who mix in your venom even to make them drunk, so as to look on their nakedness. You will be filled with disgrace rather than honor. Now you yourselves drink and expose your own nakedness. The cup in the Lord's right hand will come around you, and utter disgrace will come upon your glory. For the violence done to Lebanon will be overcome you, and the devastation of its beasts by which you terrified them, because of human bloodshed and violence done to the land, to the town, and to all its inhabitants. Think of those words. Those are the things we see nowadays. We have teachers who are trying to teach your children that they're really the gender opposite of what they actually are. We have teachers trying to indoctrinate our children into sin and a homosexual lifestyle. We have teachers in 1 to a 1 to a 1 to a 1. Do you realize nearly every single day this academic year, at least 1 or 2 teachers has been arrested for some form of pedophilic acts? That is actual fact. They all seem to be tied to the LGBT movement, and they all seem to be in the education system. Maybe we should stop making our neighbors drink. Certainly stop making our children be confused in their identities of who they actually are. Any forcing or coercing to lose your state of mind, this is drinking and drugs. This is in many ways intellectually similar to what the schools are doing to our children in the forms of indoctrination we see. God will return to Babylon humiliation and shame and judgment. And that is exactly what we are going to get in America if we do not waken up. Have a look at this warning from Ephesians chapter 5, verses 6 to 14. Let no one deceive you with empty words. Because of these things, the wrath of God has come upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not be partakers with them. For you were formerly darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of the light consists in all goodness and righteousness and truth, trying to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. Do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but instead even expose them. For it is disgraceful to even speak of the things which are done by them in secret, but all things become visible when they are exposed by the light, for everything that becomes visible is light. For this reason it says, awake, sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. The warning, do not participate in the unfruitful deeds, but expose them. That is why we take a bold stand on this channel against the things going on, because it is not scientific. It is not of faith. They are literally leading people into the pit of fire. On, though, to the 5th woe of the Babylonians. This is idolatry. Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 18 through 20. What profit is the idol when its maker has carved it, or an image, a teacher of falsehood? For its maker trusts in his own handiwork when he fashions speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a piece of wood, awake, to a mute stone, arise. And that is your teacher? Behold, it is overlain with gold and silver, and there is no breath at all inside it. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. This is a solid principle that we have to keep in mind. Modern idolatry does not focus on the stone statues, but it manifests itself in any other object of worship or obsession. Yes, there are still people that use idols, particularly you find like Hindus. They still use idols. I worked with a Hindi guy in grad school. He had his idol on his dashboard and wherever else. All right. But we have to understand that idolatry is not just the worship of a statue. Idolatry itself also is any form of obsession that interferes. But God will make humble the idolaters. These are the final principles. So we have to remember, do not get caught up in all of this. God will certainly punish the disobedient while blessing the obedient. We must become the obedient to God to experience his blessing. We have to internalize these woes and do the opposite. Let's review those woes again. The first is to increase what is not his. Are you stealing to increase through somebody else's profit? Number 2, greedy for evil gain. Do you seek wealth for greediness? 3, builds a city with bloodshed. I would interpret this in our modern vernacular. We're not as much killing too many people to build our nations as much. But how many people are you stabbing in the back? How many people are you using to make your own wealth and not paying your bills on time? Not helping people, but defrauding them instead. In James chapter 5, he has some difficult words for those. Do we endorse debauchery? This is what our culture is doing now on a governmental level. See, I don't know if it was Department of Education or if it was localized to a state this last week. It came out that maybe it was in the teachers' unions. They literally said, if you are of a certain skin color, you are going to get laid off before anybody else. If you're the kindergarten teachers going into the schools trying to teach your children about sex before they're even incapable of comprehending it, you are endorsing debauchery. You will be judged by God. Not by us, but by God. And woe number 5 is idolatry. Anything, the worship of anything that interferes with your relationship to God. That is the important thing. Well, if you like this message, I'll remind you can head on over to the website. You can find a lot of other information there. We have newsletters, we have articles and books, and a lot of other resources over here as well. So thanks for watching, everybody. Subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Hit that notification bell and share these videos far and wide. These are certainly things that the algorithms do not like to hear. With that, thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy your daily walk in our Lord.